What's up, Rockstars? We have a financial report into CMON where we can see the inner workings of where they were at least 5 months ago. There is a little bit of delay. However, they do have some updates as well for stuff that happened afterwards. They're talking around some of the other things that were kind of like reported on around they had 2 people, they call them subscribers, that were going to buy a whole bunch of stock that didn't. So they had some bad business deals go down. They talk about that and their plans for the future, how they're going to solve the situation. We're going to be diving into some pay. We're going to be diving into a whole bunch of stuff. So let's go and get to it. All right, now, if it wasn't obvious from the name of this channel, from my entire multi-year long history on this platform, or the fact that I refuse to get a proper studio, this is not my expertise. This is just my opinion. I typically come from a little bit of an in-between where I'm very much a consumer, but at the same time I understand, I'm able to talk to, and I'm able to actually interact with the creators and the businesses that we participate with in mostly the crowd-funded board game space. However, done plenty of retail as well. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from at this, and my history of, I've looked through these several times for different companies, and every now and then we cover them. In this case, it's kind of pertinent because if you didn't know, the reason this is important is because CMON just said that they're not going to, and I always say CMON, I have for like forever. I know a lot of people do CMON, it's whatever. They were cool mini or not back in the day, all right? Either way, they laid off a lot of their creatives. They're stopping making new games, really, and are just focused on delivering the outstanding ones that they have, at least for now. Now, whether or not that'll work, whether or not they can recover from that, what that looks like in the future, that is a whole debate that maybe we'll touch on towards the very end after you get some more information. This is just to keep you more informed. I'm also going to be talking about refunds, returns, stuff like that. So, all right, let's just go. Let's just go. All right. So, just as an FYI, this is for 2024, right? So the previous year, and they were late. It was due a while ago. They didn't get it out, but now we finally got it. But just know that most of this, all the like numbers and stuff, are at the December 31st, 2024 mark, right? Okay. So with that being said, obviously you're seeing a lot of parentheses here. Parentheses are losses, right? And so in other words, if it's in that, that's a negative. If it's not, that's a positive. That's, for the most part, there is a table we're going to be looking at in the future that talks about charges that they have that is listed as a positive, but is technically a negative. They subtract the positive, if that makes sense. So either way, as you can see, 2023 revenue, 45 million. And then revenue this year, 37 million, right? 37.3 million there. You can see right here that the gross profit, right, also dropped from 23 to 17, almost 18 though. And as you can see here, the operating loss is from a positive 1.8 to a negative 2.5. And then the before income tax, all this. So lost profit for the year. On 2023, it was less than $1 million. I remember covering that because they were at over a 2 million at one point, and they had been trickling down, but they were still positive, to now a sudden change to negative 3 million. This is all USD, by the way. So definitely not a good year. They definitely lost money. There's kind of no ifs, ands, or buts there. That's kind of an obvious thing. And that explains a lot of the drastic measures they're doing, like laying off a lot of their creatives. So anyway, that's kind of where they're at here, and yeah, kind of not great. This goes down a little bit more around like the share. I care less about that, except that they went from a positive like low amount to a negative low amount. They're not really worth a huge amount either way for the amount of shares that they have. So that's kind of where that is. Now, if we go over to page 6 here, we can see an interesting tidbit. Shipping income that they count as a positive 3.7 million of shipping income. Now that sounds odd because it sounds like, oh my gosh, what the heck? They're making money. That's income that they have. And it is income into them, but then obviously it's an expense as well, right? And so as you can see here is kind of the breakdown here with customers, right? Obviously North America, or the Americas really in general, highest, followed by Europe, right? And then Asia, and then Oceania. The typical, that's pretty much everybody here. Now, if we scroll down a little bit, we have shipping income here. So let's talk about it real quick. So it says shipping income is recognized at a point in time during the period when the goods are picked up from the supplier's factories. The related shipping and handling charges are included in cost of sales, right? And so there is a cost of a sale that they report, and then there's the shipping income. This is one of the ways that it can be kind of difficult to follow these because different things are grouped in different areas. It's not always necessarily one-on-one. So the income shipping, but the outcome, the cost of it is in the cost to sale calculation, which they'll have, and I'll show off a little bit later. But either way, that's kind of what they're saying there. That's kind of what that means. Now they do have other income, which is pretty interesting as well. They have some advertising income in 2023 that is now gone. So I don't know what the advertising income was. I don't know if they were putting leaflets in their boxes or what. I don't know. I don't know what was going on. Maybe they, I don't know. It was that weird NFT stuff. Royalty income showed up quite a bit. I'm less familiar with that, so I'm going to speak on that. And overall, it's a small number either way. This whole thing only adds up to about 105. And that's kind of really the thing is this is what they're doing, right? They are producing and developing and delivering board games. That's pretty much it, right? All the other stuff. They even get some like mobile game stuff. I don't know if that's an NFT thing or not. I have no idea what's counted on that. But either way, they have a little bit there, but not a whole lot. All right, so then we have what's called finance costs. And this is interesting because it talks about the interest on their leases and on their borrowings. And as you can see, this is actually, the interest on lease liabilities has gone up, but not a whole much. But the interest and borrowings have actually gone down by quite a bit, 443 to 364, right? So they've actually owe less out. For like, if they do some like bank borrowings and stuff like that. That's actually kind of nice to see. They are definitely paying that off on schedule by the looks of it. As long as, somebody was smart enough to get in a contract. That was like a video tour ago. But no, they're paying their dues, and actually reducing their debt, which is kind of nice to see, though their like on-hand cash is a lot lower as well. All right, next up, let's dive into those borrowings a bit more. So the bank borrowings this year was at about 4 mil. Last year was 5.8, right? So they are borrowing less. And then there's kind of, the payment structure and stuff like that, right? That goes back to that 4 million, right? So anyway, yeah, it's good to see that they're borrowing less. That's nice. Now, one of the really nice things is the interest rate that they get is like really good. It's like 3%, right? So if you see here, fixed interest rate of 3%. Yeah, not bad. It must be nice to be a business because that's their multi-million dollar bank borrowing right there. Kind of helps. All right, following that, management discussion and analysis. So this is kind of interesting. It's really kind of diving into some of these things around what they are and how they work and stuff like that, how they view themselves. They say they offer a total of 131 games, with 125 of those being board games, 3 miniature war games, and 2 mobile games, and then 1 computer game, which is, again, kind of interesting that they separate them out that much. You'd almost just kind of loop it in, but, well, I guess they don't. So they also then go into this, where they actually, this is a good part here. So it's the loss for the financial year was mainly due to the decrease in sales as rising costs of living in key markets affected our customers' ability to buy games. Now, while I feel that is a fairly true statement, as I don't know about the mainly part is the problem, right? I do think that is a big contributor. I'm not sure if that's the main reason why. However, that is very much what a business, especially a publicly traded business, is going to say is the main reason why. Hey, we made all these awesome games. They just can't afford it anymore. Times are hard. It has nothing to do with anything we've done. One of the things that doesn't, for instance, mentioned here, and this is where like the ownership is dead, right? So like I'm all about extreme ownership, and that's not what I'm seeing here, because if that's the case, they haven't then reacted to that well, right? So they could just say, we didn't react to the changing in markets and what people can afford. Instead, we just did the normal FOMO thing, right? And then it kind of went down. So this isn't so much a dig at CMON as just companies in general. It's very easy just to explain everything around you except any of the decisions that you've made as a company, right? And obviously, they're not like a unicorn. They're not randomly here. It's not like there aren't other companies that are actually becoming companies, right? So there's a lot that are hurting, but there's a lot that are doing fine or even improving. It just all kind of depends on a host of factors, not just board games are expensive. If nothing else, it's the board games we make are expensive, and we haven't, changed things up enough to where, one slide doesn't completely go from a almost positive million to a -3, right? And that's pretty much a $4 million difference there, which for a company that size of CMON, which we'll get to in a moment, not too great. Okay, so they did call out their big ones here, which was a Song of Ice and Fire Tactics. Right, that one made about 2.2 mil. Then there was the God of War the board game that made about 1 mil. The Genesis Clan Wars made 0.3, and the DC Superheroes United 5.4. They have some of that is my money because I did grab that one. Okay, now this is interesting. Long-term strategies and outlook. How are they going to fix this? Okay, so they're down 3 mil. People are having a hard time buying stuff. What's going on? What are they going to do? In light of the current uncertainty brought about by the trade war, our current strategy, which, by the way, this was like not a big thing 5 months ago. I mean, it was, but it wasn't like it is now, right? So a lot of this, if they had just like delivered closer to on time, this wouldn't have even been their strategy. So this is a very shortly made long-term strategy, but whatever. Our current strategy is to because notice this isn't what they blamed really either, not necessarily, right? It's just, hey, times are tough, not, hey, there's also trade tariffs with China here for the U.S. But either way, that's like the first thing they mentioned. Reduce development costs by focusing only on the development and fulfillment of games already launched. So that's just cost cutting, right? Literally, costs is mentioned here. This is just what's costing us our people. Let's get rid of some of the people and then just deliver what we have. 2, grow the European wholesale market. Again, this is one of those things where with the tariffs and the US-China thing, Europe is by far their number 2 market, and their wholesale just essentially means retail. And 3, initiate production of small games in Europe to reduce logistics of fulfillment. So their big thing here is let go of a lot of the big crowdfunded board games we're doing. I think that's legitimate. Again, it's worded in a very kind of soulless market kind of speech, right? But that's really what they're saying is, hey, we're making these big expensive board games. Let's like calm down on that. And also there's like this weird tariff thing going on. So Europe seems pretty okay right now. Let's just invest in Europe. And that's really what they're saying. And notice again, they mentioned the small games, right? So that's really kind of what they're shooting for there. Okay. So that's kind of neat. That's kind of fun. Moving on. Financial review. Revenue via crowdfunding platforms decreased to approximately $20 million for the year in 2024 from approximately $26.4. So about a $6.4 million loss in revenue from crowdfunding specifically. Which was mainly due to the decrease in recognition of sales of 5 crowdfunded projects in 2024 compared to 6 crowdfunded projects in 2023. So one of the interesting things is I know once they went to GameFound, people felt like there was a lot of spam. And I think part of the reason is because of the pre-orders, right? Those were kind of mixed into things. So we were counting pre-orders as well, but also they announced them a lot sooner. This typically happens on GameFound. Kickstarter has a little bit of a hard time with that kind of discovery of like previews and stuff like that. So you knew that there was a lot coming from CMON even before there was available. So I think it's a lot of that. But either way, for the actual like crowd-funded things, they actually had more in 2023 than 2024. Kind of interesting. Now, again, none of them, not even their most popular one, DC Superheroes, made the 6.4 million. So it's not just like if they had done the same amount, they would have made a much. They would have had a loss pretty much either way. The average per campaign also lessened, right? Now, what deals were around when it comes to them going to GameFound, I'm not exactly sure, but the raw numbers-wise, they went down after the move. Okay. Anyway, yeah, kind of interesting there. Here you can see their dinky little mobile game of 1,044 is what they made. So it's literally a nothing burger, right? It is fascinating to me that miniature war games is separate than board games. I'm not exactly sure why. I imagine the profit margin. We'll get into profit margin in a little bit. Okay. Gross profit and gross profit margin a little bit is right now. So as you can see here, the gross profit margin decreased by 4.2 percentage points, which brought it to 48.2. And again, that's lower. So the profit margin is actually quite good on these board games. The problem is obviously the scale of it and the logistics and the high costs, even if there are a high cost to us to purchase it, right? But be cautious around when companies talk about profit margin. Obviously, this is like gross profit. This is like everything, not just crowdfunding, right? But remember last video when I talked about how they kind of get their print run paid for up front, right? This is kind of what I'm talking about here. Because a lot of the costs are actually less than they would be normally, their profit margins are almost 50%. Now, whether they should be 70%, whether they should be 20%, I think every consumer feels it should be 10%, right? And I'm sure every business person thinks it should be 70%. And 48 is a little kind of in the middle. I'm not actually like upset about a 48.2% profit margin. I think that's actually fairly good. Ideally, that profit margin is from having a lean company that reduces costs and not necessarily just makes the price higher, right? That's, I think, the difference is when consumers see profit margin, often they feel that a price is being increased as opposed to a cost being decreased, which is a lot of what businesses they don't always look towards, right? But either way, 48.2%, that's actually okay. I actually wish it was higher. Now, hear me out. The reason I wish a profit margin was higher is because obviously, the higher the profit margin, I feel more safe with the company, right? So if it's less than 50%, and again, I'm not basing this off of a whole lot of others. I don't have a lot of data points. If you're a developer and want to share some with me, I would love to hear them. Keep it anonymous, of course, but just so I understand a bit more when I talk in these, that would be great to know. But 48%, not like too terrible, but it's not the 52.4, right? So I think the 50% or higher is actually kind of nice, right? As long as it's just a well-oiled machine making it, and so the costs are low as opposed to, hey, we just expanded the price. I think that's kind of silly. But yeah, if a company doesn't make profit, they can't offer you support. They can't make new games, right? Like if you like their games and they're not making profit, then you're at a disadvantage, right? So at some point, we do got to support the companies too. Again, I'm actually kind of okay with that, but kind of interesting. And a 4% drop is actually, I think, fairly large of a profit drop. 4% when we're talking about millions kind of sucks, right? That's a bigger number than their interest on their loans, which I'm sure they cared a lot about. So they should care a lot about that as well. Okay. Next up, information on employees. Let's dig into some employee numbers real quick. They had 81 employees, down from 87 in 2023. So they are still 80 plus, but less than 100, right? So when we say that these companies are big, obviously 80 people for a board game company that is half of the revenue in crowdfunding is quite large. That's a high for a crowdfunded board game company. Not as much as some others, of course, and that has nothing to like Hasbro and stuff like that. But when among their peers, it's high. Even if, against Walmart, it's low, right? So it's all comparative, but we're talking about board game companies here. So I am fine saying that it is a large company in the context of what this channel is, what we're actually looking at, what we're talking about, not the grand scheme of the universe, okay? So 81, fairly high, a much larger company, a little bit of bloat there, right? Which is probably why they reduced it from 87 and why just recently they reduced it again. A lot of companies hit this where, especially after COVID, they hired a whole bunch of people and now they're like, wow, that's like kind of not sustainable. That maybe wasn't responsible for us to do that for a short-term gain, and now they have to let those people go, right? And that's kind of where they're at with that. On top of the basic salaries, discretionary bonuses and or share options may be granted to eligible staff by reference to the group performance, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's kind of what they're going on there. Now, what they're saying here is that for the year in December 24, that amounted to approximately $4 million that it cost them. So approximately $4 million cost to pay all these people all of what they're doing, right? Which is share options, bonuses, and payment. Now, if you do $4 million divided by 81, you get like around 49,000, which is not very high. Right, that's not a crazy expense there, and I would argue that dividing that in half, or dividing that as if they're all equal, also not a good idea. In fact, we'll get to like what the CEO is doing and stuff like that here shortly. Mainly because I'm very concerned about a trend I see with that, about the leadership of them. That definitely kind of makes me a bit cautious. But either way, people aren't exactly, not everybody, most people are not making bank on this. Even with the profit margin or whatever, whether you think that's low or high, like this is not some get rich quick scheme for a lot of the people here. The people in charge, well, that's always different now, isn't it? So we'll talk about that. Okay. Principal risks and uncertainties. This is kind of cool because one of the things they're really talking about, hey, here's what's risky to us. Outsourced manufacturers, hey, we rely on other companies to make our stuff. And if that goes south, what do we do? That's literally our business, right? Makes sense. Loss of key personnel. Hey, the people that are making the decisions that made the company what they are, we probably don't want them flying in the same plane together. That's pretty common as well. Almost every single business you're going to see this on. And then crowdfunding platforms. Hey, these companies, Kickstarter, GameFound, they could tell us we can't put our stuff on here anymore. That's over half of our business, right? And so, or at least the largest thing, I think it's actually both are like in the 40s wholesale on that. But then there's like when they go to conventions and stuff like that, they'll sell online stores, whatnot. Yeah, so obviously, we're relying on these three things. Different companies, certain people, right? That kind of makes sense. Kind of a nothing burger, but I want to go over it just because at least that tells you kind of what they're looking at there. Okay, now one of the things I wanted to talk about is a trend I see with the senior leadership of CMON that does kind of concern me. But then on top of that, we're going to talk about like refunds and stuff and how this applies to you and how you can take this. So right here, you can kind of see CMON and how they're doing. Here's Chair, and that's their CEO, right? And then I think he's actually like co-CEO with David, but then they're like doing some weird thing where they're like double dipping and he's taking over more. Either way. As you can see, we have a graph here and a trend from 2019. Now, you'll see a dotted line, a kind of a greenish line, and a bluish line. The blue, as you can see, is total compensation, right? The like lighter color teal green thing or whatever is their salary, and then the company earnings are the dotted line, right? So let's ignore the dotted line, except that obviously since 2020 it's been down, right? As a general trend. Okay. Now notice that the green and the blue are getting closer together. So what is the difference between salary and total compensation? Typically stocks, right? Or the things like that, right? That essentially make the people in charge very invested in making the company do well because they get benefit from it. That's the entire idea behind it. It's why many companies that are publicly traded do this, right? Or even otherwise. It's like, hey, we want this performance-based salary you just get. But if you're doing well, if the company's doing well, you get more, right? And that's how this started. A very traditional, especially when it was doing well, right? But then as it started to go down, you're seeing that instead of having the CEO paid like that, mostly it's just his salary. He's just got to go do his job. He's done. And I don't think that bodes confidence for me, at least. I would love to see it more where the senior leadership is invested in the company doing well because of that. And not only that, but as you can see, it actually started to even like go up because they raised up. You're going to see a lag here, right? It starts going down. Now it starts going down. It goes up and then it goes up. And now it's going down. And yeah, I think it's going to keep going down. But that line has tightened a lot, right? So I don't know, that to me, that doesn't bode confidence long term, mainly because there's not as much pressure on the company doing well. It's just how much money can I make out of this? In which case, we're looking at, if you wanted the number, about $240,000 a year, about $240,500 a year. So take that out of the 40 million and then divide by 80 instead of 81, right? And you're getting closer to what the average person does, right? And of course, there's other executive too. Again, the people you're interacting with at CMON do not make a buttload of money. So keep that in mind. The people at the top, sure. Okay. Looping back here, what does this mean for us? What is this about? I'm hearing some rumblings around refunds and stuff like that. Feel free to let me know the experiences that you're having. So obviously people have started to ask for refunds. There are people that noticed the writing on the wall even earlier. For instance, I was reached out to by someone who started to like look into this earlier in the year, right? And among other things. And Yeah, the refund already was considered high, and they're already like still waiting for refund after a long time, which is kind of crazy because the things that refunded aren't even like in production. So in other words, it's literally I just backed that and I want a refund. They eventually did get a refund, but they had to actually go through GameFound. So props to GameFound for actually getting something there. Because yeah, it's one of those things where maybe you don't impact everybody, but you impacted that person. So good job on GameFound for that. But it sucks that you had to go to GameFound to do that, right? Like it shouldn't just get the runaround for refunds, especially for stuff that hasn't even gone through. They're going to take their percentage. That's fine, right? But either way, Kanban was saying refunds already really high and then no communication for months, right? So it's just going to get worse. So we saw the same thing happen with Mythic Games, right? Where suddenly everybody's like, crap, I want a refund. I'm going to get out whatever I can. And the moment that happened, and the floodgates opened and everybody got it, and then nobody got it, right? Because then they were like, well, we can't just have it just like bleed out. And I don't know why the companies don't just do it real quick. I mean, literally when you have employees, you can just be like, hey, it's Tuesday. For Tuesday, just go through all this, right? Like that's exactly kind of I don't know, get an intern, right? That's intern stuff right there. But either way, the other problem is this same person reached out to me and said that they looked into buying a game from them, and they said that they had it in their warehouse, took the money, paid for shipping, all that, and then still haven't delivered it after a long time. So we're seeing it on both sides. But in my opinion, the moment a company is like struggling to like just do normal business practices, right? Refunds, selling items, that's a red flag to me, that the company is busy elsewhere and not on its core business, which again will only continue to hurt its core business, right? A company that can't handle sales is going to struggle, right? Like it is inherently. And so that's kind of a caution there. I guess I don't have the answer for you, and I don't know if they will continue to do well, maybe some point in the future. My opinion here, this may be a hot take, but I'm not sure they can ever come back from this in the same way that they have been. They're talking about making smaller board games and focusing on Europe, right? Which means more European-based games. Not exactly their strong suit, but let's say they even do that. That's going to be the future of CMON, a retail game company that mostly focuses in Europe. I'm not sure they can come back to crowdfunding after this and do it very well. Even if everything goes well and everybody gets their games and their refunds and whatever, I don't see that being the case, which actually hurts a lot, because in a large way, they're the reason I have this channel. I didn't make it to 1,000 subscribers until I started covering the board game Hate, which is one of my favorite games. I very much enjoyed it, and really liked the campaign, and I wanted to cover it and share more information, and a lot of you guys wanted to tune in and be like, hey, I'm also wondering more about Hate, especially because like there was a lot of people were talking about the theme and not the gameplay, and I was focused on the gameplay and stuff like that. But the only reason I play board games is because I was invited to a board game night by some nerdy friends when I got into the industry with software development, and they played Zombicide, and it was amazing, and I was in love with it. All my paintings back then were Massive Darkness. CMON didn't just affect my channel; it affected the entire industry around crowdfunded board games in a very big way. And so to see kind of the granddaddy struggle like this is kind of crappy. But honestly, that's what happens when you get old, right? You get a little bit older, you get a little lazy, you get a little bit stuck in your ways, and then things start going downhill. And the problem when you're old is once they start going downhill, they do it rapidly. And that's what we're seeing with CMON here. They're the old guard. They're from the previous times, well before COVID, right? And it looks like they've lost their way. And I'm not sure they can ever come back. So anyway, that's my 2 cents at least. When it comes to your money and your backings, I do not. They are still like a company. They still have money. They have cash on hand. One of the things they did there, I didn't cover it, but they said that they plan on shipping quite a few of these for the first half of 2025. Which is like now. So we saw how far that went, but still, I do think that they will be delivering quite a few of their games, right? I'm more okay with that. Now, as it goes on, how will that happen? That really depends on the second half of the year and how well they're able to pivot in the European sector, because that's where they're headed, right? So that's kind of what they're doing there. But I'm not exactly like everything's on fire. except for the crowdfunding futures, which I think are. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. Let me know your thoughts below. Can they come back to crowdfunding? Are you going to ask for refunds? If you have you gotten refunds? What's the experience like interacting with them? Let me know in the comments below. I'll be interested. I will be reading those, of course. I'm going to pivot from this unless something dire happens. Unless this is like a huge thing that I got to cover because I want you guys to be well informed. I'm actually going to pivot to a traditional news video. There's some exciting things that I've been sitting on that I haven't covered before at all that I want to tell you guys about. There's a review coming up. It's literally staged on my table. I'll be doing that. Everything's all ready. I got all my thoughts down. I just got to record to get out to you. So some more positive news coming up here shortly, which will be kind of fun. I also have another unboxing to do. So I'll do that as well. So reviews, unboxings, news, all that's coming up, of course. And then, yeah, if there's an update here, if it warrants a response or a talking point based off your comments, again, I will be reading those. So do let me know, and others. I'll do that, of course, as well, because at the end of the day, this is our money on the line. And so it's kind of really important to us. And I want to make sure that that gets talked through as well. So if that makes sense, we'll do that as well. But that's kind of probably the next month here, right? Some reviews, some unboxing, some news, maybe a talking point or two. But otherwise, you guys have a great rest of your day. Guys, thank you so much for supporting this channel, to all my patrons, to all my YouTube members, to all the people that are liking, subscribing, commenting, all that. Guys, seriously, thank you so much. You do make it to where I can speak freely about stuff like this, and it's very invigorating to be reliant on you, and I answer to you guys, and not necessarily them, if you know what I mean. So anyway, thanks guys. Take care.